Hey guys, Officer Kevin here. Just wanted to check in with everybody. Thank you for listening to the live show last week. We hope you enjoyed it. More to come of that soon, so stay tuned. We're taking a little bit of a breather this week, so in lieu of a new episode, we do have something a little different. This is something we've given out on the Patreon a handful of times before, which is our bonus spin-off show, Fire Bros, where we decide to burn or save different pieces of media. This is an episode that we recorded back in March of 2021. We reviewed 4 different pieces of media, which is typically par for the course. We reviewed the Chicago Bulls documentary series, The Last Dance, the video game Bug Fables. We reviewed the Netflix movie Death to 2020, and we reviewed the documentary movie Tickled, which that was a ride. I will say that much at the top of the show. But I will say thank you everybody for listening and supporting us. If you like this, you can get a lot more of it over at patreon.com/thoughtcops. We got a bunch of these episodes in there, and we try to do these once a month. So if you like it, more to come, obviously. We'll be back with a regular episode again next week, so apologies for the delay. Again, thank you for your support, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy.
Welcome to Fire Bros, the Thought Cops alternate universe spin-off bonus episode podcast where we pretend like we're firemen from Fahrenheit 451 instead of the Thought Police from 1984, and instead of policing internet culture, we burn media or enshrine it in a convoluted rating system known as the Library of Regress. I'm Fire Bro Grant.
And I'm Fire Bro Kevin. I feel like sometimes we do these shows and it feels like toddlers playing with toys. Like, I want to be the policeman. I want to be the fireman.
Right. It's a parody of that.
Where
it's a parody of what? Children.
Playmobil toys?
Yeah, we're making fun of children while making poignant, salient points about society.
Somebody's got to stick it to these kids. I mean...
Yeah, they've gotten away with things for too long.
Seriously. I'm not kidding around. So we're back. It's been a little while, and we do apologize. We'll toss something good your way, a little bit of extra content for waiting. We're going to hope to get back on track again with this. Shit's been kind of crazy. We've been guesting on more shows than ever recently and doing a lot, and the Twitch streaming and everything. So we do appreciate your patience. But, we're here. It's March 2021. The pandemic is over. Just kidding. Not for me. For some people it is.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, we've been busy with a couple other things, which is always good, reaching out to some new audiences and stuff like that. We would like to get a little bit more back on track with this stuff. It is what it is. We're trying our best over here. But
before we do get to the main segment, though, I was thinking like when the pandemic is over, because it will be over at some point, are people going to be consuming less media for a while? Because I feel like, for example, I've been playing a lot of video games during this pandemic, and I feel like when I can go outside and do stuff again, I don't know if I'm going to, it's going to be like a painful reminder.
I feel like I don't know. I'm
not going to stop, but I'll cut down,
Right. It's sort of hard to say, but I feel like the only answer is that it's going to change, like I get the feeling that a lot more people are going to be working from home than
True.
like, so you're going to have more people that are sitting around, you know, pretending to do work at their houses and not commuting and stuff like that. And a lot of times people would, you know, like listen to podcasts while commuting and stuff like that. So like, that's not to say I think it'll go one way or the other. I think it'll just sort of be different. I think life's going to be different. And I think that there's no real trajectory forward that you can sort of accurately, you know, pin one way or the other. I don't know.
The way I see it is, you know, a couple things. People, you know, they're playing a lot of video games. They're binge watching a lot of shows on streaming services. And I feel like when people can go outside and do stuff to a normal capacity again, there's going to be a lot less of that kind of thing.
Right.
And I also think for the people who do work at home, you know, I think that for the people who are commuting, it's they work all day, they're driving all day, they get home. They probably just want to sit around and watch a movie or watch a show, you know? But like people who are working at home, the second the day's over, they probably want to get out of the house, you know?
Right.
Which again leads, you know, more to the point of, I don't know, it'll be interesting. I've been trying to quote unquote take advantage of the, you know, the time I have in this pandemic, as shitty as it is. I'm, you know, watching and playing and, you know, doing all kinds of stuff I meant to do for a while. And, you know, I'm like, oh, well, I'm so busy, you know, well, now I'm not. So,
right.
I mean, I am, but I'm also
the only
not, you know?
other thing that's sort of going to be like a little bit of a difference is going to be the fact that like when things do pick up again, like people will be spending their time a little more wisely. But then as a result of that, I do think that there will be a point where it's like, oh, okay, I don't have to sit inside all the time and binge watch all of my favorite TV shows. I can go outside and I can do this and I can do this. And then I can sort of like come back to some of these things on my own time and my own terms. And I think that'll mean that like things are moving forward with life and that like you can start like drawing more inspiration from those things as they happen, as opposed to like trying to force out content, you know?
And that's the way I see it too, in a way, is like, I feel like it's easier to enjoy, you know, for example, like a video game or a TV show when it's like you've been like, this is your time to chill at home. You've been out and about doing stuff. When it's like, you know, I know that we both know when you're doing mostly that and your socializing time, it's just like, it makes it less endearing.
Well, that's where like, I don't like during the Twitch streams, I've been playing Paper Mario, obviously. And that's almost to me like, I don't know, my workouts have been lasting for like 3 hours lately. And then like I've been working more than I have, you know, the past entire year. So it really does feel like when I sit down to play a video game that it's like I actually get to enjoy it, because I feel like the reason I couldn't enjoy video games during the pandemic was because I felt like I was just slowly entertaining myself to death, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like it is nice to have that like break from reality, because it just felt like the pandemic itself was too much of a break from reality, and I just felt like I was fucking spinning my wheels, you know?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So.
Speaking of that, you know, we're back here again with Fire Bros. We're talking about more content that we've consumed during the quarantine. So all 4 of the topics today, we saw all of us for the first time, you know, while we've been locked up and microchipped and whatever the hell else people say. So the first one on the list is the Netflix documentary series The Last Dance. It's about the 1990s Chicago Bulls.
Indeed.
Now, this is a little different than the normal I feel we talk about, and that's kind of why I wanted to pick it. Also because it's a hometown. You know, it's a hood classic. You know, we're from the Chicagoland area, so.
Right.
We both, like, I think we've talked a little bit about it, but we both felt like a similar nostalgia, you know, watching this, because like this is the world, you know, we were kids when Michael Jordan was like, you know, the king of sports. And I'll be the first to say, though, I was not a sports fan as a kid at all, and I'm still not really.
Right.
I find myself like I'm drawn to like sports movies and sports documentaries and stuff, but I find watching the games just to be like, I don't want to call it a waste of time, but it just feels like a massive time sink. You gotta like just seeing like people I know who are into it, like they're like, oh yeah, got a game tonight, gotta watch a game tonight. So they're like 3 or 4 hours, and it's multiple times a week, and it's like you just watch them do the same stuff, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's just the way I see it. It's on the commitment that is required to be a true sports aficionado seems to be intense. But this is a 10-part. Or is it 8 or 10-part, Grant?
I believe it was 10. Hold on, I'm checking right now. It is, it's 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's a compressed story. It's on the court, off the court. The culture around everything, the people's stories, the history.
Right.
And like a lot of Chicago,
Yeah, and like you said, it's like we grew up in that era, and it's like I wasn't glued to the TV, but I just remember like Michael Jordan being the most the most widely recognized name in all of sports. I mean, to the point where he was not even a sports icon, but just like an American icon, a world icon, sure. And like growing up in that era and knowing that like he sort of represented Chicago in a sort of way, I think is what initially like drew me in, to wanting to watch it. And like you said, it's like, I'll get sort of amped up watching certain specific games or watching playoff games or watching like certain series and stuff like that. But like you said, the
World Series for the Cubs was like, I mean, you got to watch that. But like, I was at a bar when they won, and it was just like a really fun experience.
Yeah, exactly. I like stuff like that. But yeah, like you said, it's just like I feel like when I sit down and I watch sports all the time that I'm just like sitting and consuming, like in the same way that we're talking about like, entertaining ourselves to death. It's like I'd rather be doing things, making things. Like I get the appeal, but also like I want to be like doing things. I don't want to just sit there and watch other people do things. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just something different about consuming sports to me, where it's like, otherwise you're consuming something that somebody put a lot of like, I don't want to say like they don't put thought into sports and stuff, but it's just like you're consuming like you watch a movie, it's like art, it's a story, It's like it looks different than like another movie. Any sports game looks the same. I mean, granted, the details are, and this is probably like sounding insane to some people, but
no, I relate to it heavily because this is the same sort of the same thing that goes through my head. And I guess the through line that I understand this to be in terms of having watched this documentary is that there are, as insane as it sounds, there are story arcs and there's different characters, different players like that. This sounds like nerd culture 101 is describing.
But now you're speaking my language. Oh,
describing
this is an anime?
Describing sports like it's an anime. But I mean, you watch this and it's just like the players' mentalities going through this, and like how they had to face off against the same person again, and like how they grew past their previous selves, and like what they did to work on this, what they did to work on this, and stuff like that. And it's just like, you sit there and you watch it and it's the same thing over and over again, but there is like a certain like there are through lines to what's happening, and I think that's where it like really sort of piqued my interest, because it's like, I remember Michael Jordan. I remember the fucking, 90s Bulls. Everybody does. But like some of these like rivalries and like the smaller things like switching players out and stuff like that. It's just like, oh, there's all this stuff that was happening that I don't really remember all that well. But like, I'm glad that I get to sort of, see it again. Because I was like 7 when this shit was happening, or younger.
Yeah, what was it like? Yeah, I mean, like, what was the three-peat? Was that 96 through 98, or was it?
I think so. It was 91, 92, 93, and then I think it was like a 1 or 2 year off, and then 4, 5, 6. I don't know.
Whatever, it's in the fucking documentary.
Yeah,
Go
you look it up. You Google it. It doesn't matter. Yeah. We're doing a show here. But yeah, I mean, so we're both young as this stuff's happening, and it's just like, your memory is not great, and it's hard going back watching the games and shit like that because there's hundreds of them.
Oh, they haven't aged well,
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But I think like, yeah, I remember like all like, my grandparents wearing like the Bulls gear all the time. And like, just, I remember just all the fucking merchandise, man.
Right.
I had this, I don't know if when you were a kid, did you ever have like this, like a big cup in the bathtub you would fill with water and pour over your head?
Yeah,
like,
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember very specifically the one I had Dennis Rodman on it from McDonald's.
Oh yeah.
And it was like if the cup had hot liquid or cold liquid in it, like his hair color would change on the side.
Well, funny enough, since you're talking about like memorabilia, I went to my parents' house about a week or two ago, and I grabbed my sister had a bunch of the Bulls championship shirts that like were sort of hand-me-downs to me, and I'd wear them as like sleep shirts, when I'm like 10 years old.
Oh yeah, same.
And so I brought a bunch of those home with me, so that's my new streetwear merch. So
nice.
I get the repeat three-peat shirt and all the classics.
All the classics. And not to mention, I mean, the documentary does go into it a bit, but Space Jam, I mean,
right.
That was like a huge like cultural bastion for a lot of people around that time. And, I mean, kids, I guess. But, I mean, that was Michael Jordan. I mean, there hasn't been anything like that. I mean, up until now, of course. And obviously it's not as good. We get it. The Lola Bunny's not as fucking sexy, smoking hot.
Right.
And then, hey, I'm just saying you had to be there, and the documentary does kind of go into a lot of that.
Yeah. God, there's so much that the documentary goes into. Like, obviously, it's how long are the episodes? Hour long?
Yeah, about an hour each.
Yeah, I think when I watched it, and I guess this is sort of the tie-in with me and why I watched it in the first place and why I suggested it, was like after the whole, after being stuck inside for however long and, living through this fucking hellhole of a pandemic, like I stayed up one night watching this, and I swear to God, I stayed up until like 8 a.m. Like I started it at like 11 p.m. and I just like couldn't stop watching it. Yeah. And it was just like so much of it, like just the emotion and like the fucking like orchestral score and like the fucking amazing like soundtrack and everything that like, all of the early 90s rap and stuff like that and how they just like interwove that. It was very, to think that some of that footage existed for how long it did and the way that they use that and like all of that shit is just like, I don't know, it was very profound to me. And for like it, my big love of it was like having this point of like feeling like, things are sort of down with life right now and there's no sort of getting back up from it, and watching, the success of the Bulls made me feel like, oh, I need to work harder and I need to be successful. And it was like this jolt of positivity in my like creative life that it's just like, I needed this right now because like watching this has actually made me feel better and felt like all the struggle of like the entire last year has sort of like to a certain point been worth it, or that there's a light at the end of the tunnel,
Like I would say I wasn't like quite as hooked in the same way, but I did feel a similar sense of like, just, I mean, it is truly a unique story,
right? In
the way that this guy is like, there was like some certain pull quotes of his like from the movie and like some things people would say where he was like, I'm going to be the best at this, and again, a very anime,
right.
But just like a guy who was like, hey, I'm going to be the best at this thing. And then just him being the best athlete on the fucking planet,
right,
exactly, and just like his life, and just like he's just like, yeah, I'm going to do this, and then he just does it, and it's just a crazy story, and it's like, again, like you said, there was a ton of like found footage, and it was like,
right,
how long have they been sitting on this?
Yeah,
it feels like you're watching something special.
So the funny thing is, Michael Jordan is such a petty asshole that as soon as LeBron signed his contract for Space Jam 2, he was like, okay, release the footage, do it.
Oh, we're putting that's this out what now. Happened? Are you kidding me?
No.
Man, I mean, that's just whatever. I mean,
because he was like the final deciding vote on when they would release that footage, and then he finally said, do it. And it is one of those things. And yeah, like you said, like even in being the best. Like, his first couple years as an athlete, like, he was a fucking freak athlete, like an insane scorer. Like, just nobody could fucking touch him, but he didn't have like a good team. So even when he is like, you know, at the top of where anybody at the top of the NBA is sort of like, holy shit, like, what the fuck do we do with this guy? Oh, we'll just sort of, you know, we'll fuck around with everybody surrounding him, and we'll make him sort of like a one-man team, and let's see how you can sort of, you know, he did sort of mature a little bit and pull back, and the time that he spent, like, you know, playing baseball and shit like that, and the team got to get better. Then when he returned, it's just like, oh, now you have like an actual foundation, you know, you have all these other people that are now as good, not as good as you, but that can fucking support you when you're playing. And it's I can nerd out about a lot of this shit for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like you mentioned earlier, the different characters, so to speak, like we're talking about like Dennis Rodman, Scottie Pippen,
right?
And like the coach Phil Jackson. You know, there's a lot of interesting personalities, which I think you have to have an interesting kind of out there mentality, personality, whatever, to want to be like, yeah, I'm going to be the best at this thing. You know, most people wouldn't think or even say anything like that, you know?
Right. And yeah, like the different, I mean, I think one aspect of the documentary that I really did like was how they focused on each episode had like their different focal point, you know? Like the episode about Scottie Pippen and, you know, how he signed this bad contract and how that, like, you know, later on really sort of like set up his interaction with the team, that he was arguably one of the second greatest NBA players at the time, and he was, you know, horrifically underpaid, and as a result he would be an asshole, you know. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you don't really maybe see that so much on or off the court or whatever, but it's just like all this stuff is happening behind the scenes. And it's like you feel sorry for this guy, and you do relate to him in the sense, because it's like, what the fuck would any of us do? You know, the guy got fucked, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some of the finer details here to kind of remind myself, but you know, it covers a lot of controversies too. There's the infamous you know, Michael Jordan with his like the death of his father, and there was a lot of news stories saying that it was like due to like his Michael Jordan's gambling stuff. Which, I mean, the documentary says it was not the case. I mean, you know, it doesn't seem like it, but
yeah, I don't know enough to sort of delve into the details too much, but
yeah, it's one of those like rumors and whatever controversies. And I'm actually go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to, I guess, get a little more into my ideas about some of that. But if you had a different sort of talking point that you
no, just go ahead. Yeah.
There was like a very human moment where we sort of got to see Michael Jordan's thought process behind a lot of this shit. And when like some of these controversies started arising and shit like that, like it was difficult because, like, you know, with some of the shit we talk about on Thought Cops, it's like you get all this cancel culture shit, and people are out here raping people, and people are like sexually assaulting people, like coercing them, like doing really bad shit, being racist, all that. Michael Jordan did not even 1/100th of any of the, like, he gambled a couple times with more than enough money.
They said it's easy to get canceled nowadays.
Yeah. Well, yeah, back then it was just like, oh my God, this guy's playing golf before a game. Yeah. Like, it was insane. And there was a level to it that did humanize him a lot more for me, because I know it's a fun thing for people to be like, Michael Jordan, he's a fucking asshole, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, kind of, sure, whatever. But like the point being is like, the guy was the Mickey Mouse of the NBA. And it was like a standard that society placed on him that he could never fucking, you know, uphold, you know. And it was one of those things where he's talking about, he's just like, yeah, I'm doing normal people things. And like the whole idea of like this clean cut kid that's, you know, out here you know, with his Nikes on and shit like that, you know, playing a nice clean game of basketball. He's just like, that's not me. I didn't invent that. Everybody else sort of forced that on me. And I'm trying, you know, when he talked about, he went to go gamble with his dad the one day. He's just like, yeah, I needed a break. It was very hard. I was very stressed out. And it's just like the idea that people projected so much onto this guy, I mean, is difficult. And it is one of those things where this documentary could sort of bring you behind the thought process of like, what did these people actually have to deal with? Because it wasn't just like, oh, you just win. It's like, no, there's still struggle, you know, like they still had to fucking struggle with all of this shit, even if that was just managing expectation, you know?
Yeah.
So.
And, you know, there's also like a lot of cameos in this. Obama was in it.
Jerry Seinfeld. Well, he was in like an older clip. You know, there's like interviews with like modern people, but then there's like Jordan like schmoozing with celebrities. He's like Jerry Seinfeld. I believe Bill Murray might have been one of them. Yeah. Hey Phil. No, it just you know, then like there's like a Carmen Electra, like a lot of faces, people who were involved, and you know. This is also Kobe Bryant was in it, and it was I think released or not. It was obviously after, but it was right.
You know, around the time.
I think it was dedicated to him.
Yeah, and I also see a note here. I'm looking it up. Apparently, this was actually not supposed to release until like the summer, and they pushed it like to get out sooner so people would have like something nice to watch during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't really make a difference because, you know, here we are a year later and we're still in the pandemic. So, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, because I remember a lot of people.
That counts. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember a lot of people talking about it when it first came out. And I was like, I got to watch that. And
yeah, same.
Yeah. It was just like, oh, let me watch one episode of this. Let me get it started. And like I said, I fucking nearly watched all of it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's it kind of leaves off on, you know, the whole dynasty and whatever it is, and I don't know, just where they are now, and just, you know, there's like some, you know, there are emotional moments of, you know, looking back on this stuff and all that really. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about it really.
The Dennis Rodman episode, I think, was like he's definitely one of those weird sort of just like diamond in the rough sort of like
people. He like married himself.
Yeah. And like just how they successfully utilized him, you know, because like his whole again, his anime story arc was, you know, he was like desperately depressed and suicidal, like again trying to live up to these expectations of like, you know, being this clean cut younger kid, et cetera, to the point where he was just so unhappy. He nearly, you know, he allegedly almost killed himself or whatever, and came back with this, you know, new look, new attitude, and how they like utilize that to their advantage with the team. Because it's like, you know, you remember some of those later seasons, he was a very important player, and the guy didn't score. He scored like maybe 2 points his entire career, but like his weird, unique intelligence behind like why he did things. Like, I swear to God, when he was talking about like, oh, if Jordan throws it this way, it's going to bounce this way. If Bird throws it this way, it's going to go this way. You know, it hits the backboard, it goes here. It hits here, it goes here. And he's gesturing, and it's just like, I rewinded that and watched that like 7 times. It was just like, this guy is the worst spoken person, and
he really is,
and is maybe one of the most intelligent players on the court somehow. You know what I mean?
I like how the documentary does like reveal that, or at least highlight that he is, you know, very intelligent guy, and that's why he's friends with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and how Phil Jackson had this thing about their like weird like Native American bond together, and how he called him the backwards walker. And it was just like, man, like, again, coming from the point of like just being depressed, you know, up until the point that I watched this, and sort of seeing a light at the end of the tunnel through watching this, it's just like, man, I can relate to that so well, just feeling like you're so sort of like broken and coming out the other end like this fucking weird person that's just sort of like in need of guidance and finding the fucking conduit for being able to do that. And through some of his controversies of, overstaying his one night in Vegas and shit like that. And, the fact that he still got to play for the team despite all that, it's like they knew, despite the fact that it's like you're playing with the greatest player of all time, they still knew how to use him correctly, was fucking amazing to me. That was one of my favorite parts was the Dennis Rodman episode.
I also, covered the famous flu game where they explained like Michael Jordan ate a bad pizza, and they kind of painted it to seem like he was potentially food poisoned, even.
Yeah.
Which it shouldn't be that easy to do, but apparently it is. So, or at least it was.
Right. Someone just shows up with a pizza, and they're just like, "Yeah, okay, we'll eat it." Maybe not.
I mean, they ordered it, but they said it was like very suspicious.
Right.
Because there's like nothing else open, but hey, he did it, and it's I mean, that would, God, I can only imagine how fucking awful that was.
Right.
Like, I've had food poisoning. It's pretty fucking painful.
Right. And then imagine being an elite athlete playing like at the top of your game, and he, again, he fucking held it together. So like that's in and of itself is just one of those things where it's just like, this is not, the fucking guy to fuck with,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And you can tell like in the difference in drive. Like I think I brought this up one of the past couple episodes where it's I was arguing with, I think, Serial Law Obeyer. I said something along the lines of like, you see the footage of LeBron where he's like faking getting injured and like he's pratfalling and shit like that. And like all this stuff. And it's just like, man, this is a guy that like almost died from food poisoning, and he's just like not taking any shit from anybody. It's just like that level of imposing force. Even like the final couple games against the Utah Jazz, where Scottie Pippen was having really bad fucking back pain, and they're like, you know what? Don't even play, just stand on the fucking court. Like your presence is enough. Like that, people see Scottie Pippen, they don't want to fuck with you. Like, just be out there. And like they kept walking him like back out to like stretch out his back, and then like back into the game and back out. And it was just like, I don't know. It was just fucking amazing. I don't know.
But yeah, trying to think. Like, I mean, again, it was a nice piece of Americana, especially at a time when that was more respectable, or at least an easier pill to swallow.
Right.
So yeah, I guess moving on to unless you have any further thoughts on this topic, you want to make
No, I mean, this is by far, I mean, at least as far as documentaries go, it was one of those things where it's like a fun experience to watch the whole way through, and it doesn't feel like I have to be necessarily glued to every single thing that, when you watch like a documentary and you're just like, oh, this is sort of boring or whatever the fuck. It was like, this was, I think, legit good filmmaking disguised as a documentary. So I do think it's like definitely one of my favorite documentaries, maybe one of my favorite like sports miniseries or whatever the fuck you want to call it. But I liked it a lot, and it's top shelf for me. So
I didn't connect with it quite as much. There was a lot of themes and points that I really did enjoy. Honestly, I kind of feel like 10 episodes, like, it was like maybe a little long. Just for me personally, I did feel like it was like I feel like some stuff was not as interesting, but I get that it's like, it's comprehensive and they had this footage. So it's not really a complaint, but I would say I would probably put it on the shelf, to be honest, just because, like, again, I'm not like and I know like neither one of us are necessarily big sports guys, but like, I really just have a hard time connecting with it as much as like, some people do. And even though like there's plenty of like sports movies that I really, really do enjoy. like, getting into the major minutia of this at some point did kind of feel a little, at times, like a little much to me. But, it's a reluctant shelf.
Right.
I would say maybe, I've been bouncing around back and forth in my head whether or not I would put it in the library or just leave it on the shelf. So,
yeah, I think with me, my ability to recognize like something that I don't inherently sort of understand, like when it comes to sports or anything like that, is just the concept of like endeavor, the concept of human endeavor, the concept of like passion, of like discipline, of like working towards something and like finding things that you need to like work on and make better. Through that, I can kind of like, I always try and relate that back to me in terms of like what I'm trying to do, like whether it's with music or with comedy or with whatever. It's just like I can look at like what Michael Jordan does, and despite the fact that it's like I'm not as athletic as him, I never would be, could be, anything like that. It's still like interesting for me to see the thought process behind a lot of these players and like what goes into that, because like I think anybody from any discipline of any sort of pursuit can learn something from anything like this, and I
would agree. Yeah.
I think my like the fact that I was drawn to it was in and of itself like, just the cultural shit, but I do think that the added factor of just like my like intense wanting to understand what went into this also sort of fueled like why I liked it so much,
Totally. Switching gears a little bit though, just a little bit. We'll be talking about a video game here. It's been a while since we've discussed a video game on Fire Bros.
Same thing.
Yeah, I know you and I were both. I remember like I saw the trailer for this and I like sent it to you. I'm like, you got to check this out. And like,
yeah,
like, oh, that looks really fucking cool. This is Bug Fables: The Everlasting Sapling. It's an indie RPG game inspired by the art design and gameplay of the first two Paper Mario games, which is an important distinction to make. I think the reason this game exists is purely because of the first two games in the Paper Mario series are so beloved by fans.
Right.
And they went off. The third one they got a little weird with. It got a little different. It wasn't horrible. After that, no one is really like, I don't know. No one seems to be enjoying it. No one I know, at least. I really, it's a bummer because those games are truly like, it's just so much fun. Very charming. Even
people that I know that have Origami King and that say that they like it are like, yeah, but it's not the same,
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, it doesn't have to be, but also like if you got to make the distinction, it's like, yeah. I mean, it isn't, it really isn't.
Right.
But this is a very, very close approximation of that. Bug Fables was, down, like I said, even the art style, it's very familiar. I'd say it's not quite as polished, but it's like maybe somewhere between like the N64 and the GameCube game.
Right. Yeah.
In terms of, I guess the level of polish, if you want to say that, but it's a little different in the sense that it's sort of like it takes cues from maybe like classic RPG series, like in Final Fantasy, you typically have or like Chrono Trigger, you have like 3 party members in a fight,
right? And
you kind of focus on leveling them up, as opposed to like Mario and his like companions you switch out.
Right.
This game, it follows V, Kabu, and Leaf. And it takes place in this bug kingdom. I think it was called Bugaria or something.
Yeah, I think like Bulgaria, but without the Bulgaria. Oh. I'm assuming.
I never made the connection, but I guess that might have been what they're going for. But I really found I don't know. I mean, I guess that's the setup for it. But before I'll hand it off to you, I want to say that I really, really liked the setting of this game and the world. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. Like the lore they set up and everything. Right. It was just very interesting. And I liked how like the different there's these different kingdoms of like different kinds of bugs and stuff.
Right.
They really just like had this like simple idea and just ran with it.
Yeah, I feel like they expanded on it like really, really well. Like you were talking about the lore and stuff like that. Like there's an obvious like sort of deep storyline that, you know, yeah, you start off, you're a couple of bugs having adventures, but it's like, but what's with this one guy that keeps speaking in tongues? And like, what's the story behind like some of these cans, and how come there are no people, but there's allusions to the fact that there used to be people? And like what happened with, you know, the roaches that apparently used to exist long ago, but now they no longer exist. And like, yeah, the different types of bugs that they have and stuff like that. Like it was a very surprisingly charming game. And I think that the Paper Mario aspect of it wore off pretty quickly. And I think it found its own sort of unique identity within what they were trying to do. I think that they found that pretty quickly, you know?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at a list here. It says it was also influenced by Persona 5, Golden Sun, and Xenoblade Chronicles. That's interesting. I could see. I played Xenoblade. I can kind of see that. So this is actually made by a very small independent game studio out of Panama called Moonsprout Games. So yeah, like a very small team put it together. You know, which is again very impressive. And
right.
You know, there's like this like artifact is like the everlasting sapling. There's, you know, there's this mystery of like this potential corruption, you know. It just, I mean, I don't know. The game again is very charming. I would say like, I mean, I would say it's not a perfect game.
Right.
Parts of it feel, it's hard to explain. Like parts of it feel like, I don't want to say clunky, but I can't think of a better word, so I guess
honestly, I kind of agree with clunky. There were times when, yeah, I don't know, like I think our main complaint, well, I think this is one complaint that's indicative of other things, but like the fucking bee meringue.
Thank you for bringing that up. God damn it. Yeah.
It's central to what you have to do in the platforming elements of the game, but it's not the smoothest thing that you use, you know, like it is clunky, it's difficult to use, and you use it often. And I feel like that's sort of the game in general. Like it's hard not comparing it to Paper Mario because obviously that's sort of more or less the origin behind the idea. But like the battle scenes or the battle screen gameplay, whatever, like the battles were not as fluid. It didn't feel like it felt clunky. It felt difficult sometimes. It felt like some of the action commands and stuff like that, just like it didn't have the same sort of lived-in feel as some of the Paper Mario games had. It didn't have that.
I would agree. Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like the stuff with, you know, like I guess the easiest analog to think of is I forget what was the name, Paper Mario, Cooper or something. Like the guy with the Band-Aid on his nose.
Coops, I think.
Coops. Yeah. Where you would like jump on his shell and kick him, you know, like in the main games. And that's like, you know, you hit a switch or something. I feel like this like beamerang rather, it just, you have to like hit it in this exact right angle in the exact same spot. And you got to like hold the button down and you got to like kind of angle your fingers on the controller in a weird way. And it sounds like a minor complaint, but they make you do this quite a bit.
Yeah. The platforming elements of it weren't fantastic.
Yeah, I would find myself like jumping on platforms and like falling off. And like, granted, it wasn't like a huge setback most of the time. Like sometimes you would take damage though, like, oh, well, whoops, or maybe not. I actually don't know if you took, I think it just kind of set you back.
Yeah, but I think it just set you back. But yeah, it was like frustrating sometimes, you know? And
and I know like Paper Mario, you know, I guess it did not have that same level of issue. I mean, like I wouldn't expect the precision platforming of like the regular games, but it felt a little more responsive for sure than like the platforming in this game.
Right. Yeah. And again, like I think the battle shit sort of like wore me down after a while. Again, like I mentioned at the top of this episode, I've been playing Paper Mario, like the first one. For the streams, and it's been like it's just a very I like those games are very polished. They're very refined. Everything feels correct in your hand. Like the action commands feel good to hit. Like, it feels good to dodge, like all that stuff. This, it's like it did sort of start wearing down on me to the point where it's like, I don't dislike the game, but it did after a while, obviously it took me a long time to get through it. And it's because I was having like some difficulty playing it. It wasn't as rewarding, as fulfilling, which is disappointing to me because I like the game so much and I like the world so much and I like the creativity of all of it. And like to know that like the gameplay elements themselves sort of didn't live up to that felt sort of like disappointing to me,
I mean, granted, it's like it was definitely refreshing to return to this kind of game.
Right, yeah.
Albeit it's not Paper Mario, but it's damn close. And in some ways, I think like the storytelling was like, potentially like even more like advanced and whatever. Like, they realized, hey, we're doing our own thing. Let's just have some real fun with this.
Yeah, and like I think that comes across, and like, not to jump too far ahead with the whole rating system or whatever, I probably would shelf it, but I think my one criticism is I would like to see, since this game seemed to be somewhat of a success, if they were to come out with a sequel that was like really good, like Thousand Year Door version of this game, like I'd be 100% down to like purchase the sequel to this game,
I mean, I would hope so, and I think that it got a lot of critical acclaim, and like just for the level of like, I'm imagining this was probably pretty low budget, and I think it seemed to sell pretty well too. So I would be surprised if there wasn't anything to follow it.
Yeah.
But we'll see. You mentioned the battle system. Like it could get a little. I mean, like any RPG, like it, can be somewhat redundant after a while. But I did find it. I enjoy when RPGs throw in like an extra like timing or action mechanic where it's not just picking and choosing.
Right.
Moves. So I like the different characters. Like I enjoyed like Kabu, like you have to hold down the stick and let it go at the right moment and do more damage, and like throwing the beamerang in battle was fun.
Right.
Or the Leaf with the ice moves and stuff like that. And learning new moves, learning the combo moves, like dropping Kabu from above and he digs him out and stuff.
Right.
Like really utilizing those like on a boss battle felt pretty rewarding, I would say.
Right. And yeah, there definitely had to be, I'd say, compared to Paper Mario, which like, again, I was like in elementary and middle school when those games came out, and like,
same.
I don't think that they're necessarily easy. Like towards the end of some of those games, it does get pretty fucking difficult. But like they're very like beginner friendly, and as it as they go on, they become more and more difficult. But like I could beat those games, as a younger person. This game was a little more difficult, and whether or not that was like just the difficulty or if it was just because it was a little less refined, like you did have to utilize a little bit more strategy,
Yeah, for sure.
I had to think a little bit more. I had to think about every move that I was going to do, which in and of itself was sort of rewarding. But again, I felt like I was sort of dragging through it. And I guess the only other thing would be like the badge system. The badges were a lot more important than I sort of realized. Like, again, the Paper Mario games, you could sort of go with or without the badges. And there's some people that do like badge only runs and shit like that. But like, it took me too long in Bug Fables to realize that like there are some badges you like definitely need to get and you definitely need to use, because like it's too hard not to have that. And when I started pairing together, there's one that like the user becomes poisoned, but then you match that with like, poisoning heals or whatever the fuck, and it's just like, I didn't know you could like use these two in conjunction with each other, sort of thing. And it's
I didn't think about, I mean, the fact that it's like, I think what's great about like, that mentality for game design is it's like,
right.
Well, I think the best games have a very easy accessibility, but a very high skill ceiling, where it's like you can think about stuff. You're like, oh wow, there's a lot of I think that's why Pokemon is so popular, is because it's easy to figure out and pick up and play. You get it; it's very simple. But then like people who are in tournaments, like, that's a level of dedication
Right.
and like strategy that like I couldn't even comprehend.
Yeah, you're making like spreadsheets and shit like that. Like people know
Yeah.
all of the stats of everything inside and out. And I would also hate for that to be sort of like central to the game, though. And I did feel like once I started sort of plateauing with Bug Fables that I had to start looking things up.
Really?
And I hate having to look things up.
I never really had to do that for the badge system. I guess, like, I don't know, maybe I just did more grinding, but I feel like even then it wasn't that much. But, like, I didn't find myself having to rely too heavily on the badge combos and stuff like that. Or were they called badges, or was it something else?
It might have been something else, but badges is fine.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. Or they were called medals.
Medals, yeah.
Close enough, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, there was, some parts like any RPG to some extent where it's like, oh, hit the flying enemy with the boomerang. Then when he's on the ground, you can hit him with Kabu. That kind,
Right.
But you can only hit the front enemy with, that whatever. Like that strategy, And what I will say actually is maybe it would have been nice if it was more than just 3 characters.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like granted in Paper Mario, you always have Mario out, but there's like 9 or 10 partners per game. Or, like Final Fantasy VII, it's like, yeah, you use 3 characters at a time, but you have, again, like 8 or 9 characters and you swap them out, throughout the game in different battles and stuff. Like, I did find myself getting a little bit tired of the same 3 characters with the same things they do every time.
Yeah, that aspect did get stale. I did sort of like it in terms of it, like, they did explain at the beginning, they're like, oh, every exploration team is 2 people, but you guys can
Except
have 3
for this
or whatever.
One, yeah.
Yeah, and it
but
was
like, I mean,
one
they
of those...
they didn't have to say that, though. That was just like, they felt like that was like, oh, this is convenient for the... And again, I know it's I'm assuming it's a very small staff. I mean, from the research I've done, it seems like it. But I would have liked more variety because when I play an RPG series, like I just played like Dragon Quest 11, it's like there's again 8 or 9 different party members, and I will like swap them out because it's just kind of like keep it interesting, and that wasn't the case for this game.
Yeah, and like even if they had different moves or different sort of things like that, and I know that like that eventually you learn different things and stuff like that, but
yeah, that's true.
It did sort of, it got a little bit boring when it's just like, oh, the ice guy uses the ice attack.
Yeah.
The boomerang guy uses the boomerang attack. Like, it's like, yeah, maybe one of them gets a sword or so, like maybe they like level up the like something to keep you a little more engaged. Maybe you level up like that's another thing that I don't think that they did is they didn't really, I guess everything was through the medal system because like if you wanted to level up your attack or like, add extra hit points or something like that, most of it was like through the medals, Which
well, it was
like
Paper Mario though. You could upgrade your hit points, your teamwork points, or your medal. Well, I guess your medal points.
In Paper Mario also though, it's like, oh, you get the new hammer, and the new hammer does more damage. And there was no thing like that was like, oh, now you can beat like the easier enemies easier because like you're hitting more. It was just like, oh, you still get the 1 damage fucking boomerang for the entire game. Good luck.
Leo's in the chat. He says, Paper Mario, my favorite topic. I was hoping he would show up to... So actually, Bug Fables is a spiritual successor to Paper Mario, I would say.
That is true.
What did you think of the music in this game?
I guess since I streamed it so much, I didn't really pay too much attention to the music, to be honest.
I liked it.
Really
I would say like...
it.
It was like it could be a little bit redundant in some points, but I did find like when I started playing it, like the look and sound of the game, like immediately like hit off it's like when you're trying to like scratch something on your back and you can't hit this one crack of your back for a long time, and eventually like just like hearing the music and seeing the visuals, it was like, oh, that's it. Yes, that's it.
No,
I think it really hit that that point.
It does feel like that's the one thing, that's the one aspect of the game that I really appreciated was just like the feel of it. And again, just like just the creativity and the way that they created this world, I think was my favorite aspect of it. But again, when it came down to the gameplay itself, I was sort of like,
Yeah, I would say the battle theme I love. The boss battle theme was a lot of fun. And some of the exploration areas, I did find myself getting stuck in a couple of them, which was I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do?
Right.
But that being said, I don't think I have a whole lot else to say about this.
I guess my only thing would be a self-criticism, and this is me playing a lot of video games, especially recently, is I had it on hard mode almost the entire game. And I do feel because I'm thinking because you beat it on hard mode, you get all these extra badges and shit like that, which is rewarding. But I think it came at the cost of the game. Some of the bosses in the game were super fucking difficult. And I do feel that's part of the reason that it wore on me so much, is just it becomes less enjoyable. And I do think that I've noticed that I make things hard on myself because I do try and be completionist-y about it. And it's I should have just did the fucking easy mode and just had a more fun time playing it, I think sometimes going for the most difficult setting can be sort of, bewildering, and it does suck the fun out of a lot of shit just because it's because you feel like you have to do it. And it's I don't think that that's always necessarily true,
Yeah, I didn't, because there was at the beginning of the game, they give you that hard mode badge because I think they tell you it yields better rewards or something.
Yeah.
But I think I might have used it maybe once or twice the entire game.
I used it the entire game until the last boss, and then I turned it off because I just couldn't beat him.
And that last boss was tough enough without that. I'll say that much. That was a tough one. That was a toughie.
Well, I took hard mode off and then beat him in the first try.
So Rock Lee with the weights.
A lot easier. Yeah, exactly. And then there's another aspect of the game that was I never even got to it because once I finished the game, I was just I'm done with it. I don't want to play anymore. But the bounties where you go around and you beat other monsters in the game, that's another thing that you could do.
I did do some of that stuff. I didn't when I finished the game, I did a little bit more exploring, and I was I'm done. I'm good,
Right.
But there was I did some of the side quests. There was that one person with she's a lady with an umbrella. She's I fought her too early in the game and I got my ass kicked, and I came back later and it was so easy.
Yeah. I did the same thing with the quests too, where it's I'm gonna try and get all these quests done, and it's just maybe I should just play the game. I get sidetracked with a lot of that shit way too easy, and it's just if it starts coming at the at the expense of me not enjoying it, maybe I shouldn't be fucking doing some of this stuff. Maybe I should just enjoy it,
And that's kind of what I've accepted with a lot of these kinds of games. It's just the pacing of them, where it's it seems there was a couple things I ran into in this game where it was I ran into a couple bosses that I didn't know were side bosses. I remember I was talking to you about this one. I'm this is so fucking hard, and you're oh, you don't have to do that part. I'm oh
yeah.
And I realized that was probably an end game thing. And I was I accessed it after the second boss. And I was I was grinding for 2 hours. I'm what the fuck, man?
Yeah, because I had ran into the same boss for the exact same reason, because I thought I was on the way to the second boss, and I definitely wasn't. And it's funny that we both ran into him in the same way.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think you mentioned what you put it on the shelf.
Yeah, I think it's a shelf for me.
Here's my verdict. I'm gonna say I'm putting it in the library, but I'm putting it on a lower shelf, and I'm dusting off a higher shelf, and I'm saving it. I got a little sign on the shelf. It says, "This is where Bug Fables 2 goes."
Right. Yeah, no, I'm of the exact same mindset. If they come back with a bigger, better, more robust, more refined game, I'm 1,000% down for it.
Yeah, you heard it here, folks. Behind the paywalled episode of Fire Bros, we are saving a spot for you in the Library of Regress. Attention to the Bug Fables development team.
Right. Who is listening right now?
Moonsprout Games. Yeah. Anyway, moving on though to the third topic of the session. I want to refer to these as sessions, like in Cowboy Bebop. They didn't call the episodes. They called them sessions, and it was so much cooler.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we have these listed as books on the Patreon because
that's right. Yeah. Well, we'll figure it out.
Book 1, Book 22.
Maybe we'll do another spin-off show at some point. Who knows?
Well,
but the next
we could do sessions for each story. Each thing could be a session.
That's true. So this session is this is a Netflix original
Session 3
mockumentary. This is called Death to 2020. It's by the Black Mirror creators Charlie Brooker and Annabelle Jones.
Is it really?
Yeah. Listen, I
thought you were kidding.
I am not going to hold back. I thought this was one of the worst things I have seen in years. This was so fucking bad. I've been holding back. I told you to watch this, and I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to tell you like what my opinion was, and I think you probably could have figured it out when you're watching it. Like, there's no way he liked this piece of crap,
right?
But like when I suggested it to you, I was like so ashamed that I was even typing it. But I was like, I just want to talk about how fucking horrible this was.
Right? Yeah.
God damn it.
In the same way that I said that The Last Dance was maybe one of my favorite documentaries ever, this is one of my least favorite documentaries ever. Like, honestly, it was insulting to watch.
It was incredibly insulting. It was like, it was so, I was embarrassed. Like, I was like sitting there, like slinking into my seat, physically cringing the entire time. God, it was just, if you're gonna satirize this, first of all, number one, do a good job and be funny about it. That's the most important thing. Do a good job. Second of all, maybe wait till the fucking year is over. This came out at the end of 2020. Granted, it was the end of it, but they had to produce it and stuff, and like,
right?
They were clearly making it while, a lot of this stuff was happening, and a lot of this stuff was also very much tone deaf. It's like, it's not funny to joke about this right now. People are still fucking dying from this left and right. People are out of jobs. People like, they talked about like the Black Lives Matter with like George Floyd, and like it entered this like weird somber like shift, and it was just like I felt like somebody just like snapped my neck like Exorcist style, and my head just spun around like, what the fuck just happened? What the fuck just happened? And I'm like, oh my God, this stupid movie's still going.
Because it's in the middle of, because I have that written down in my notes, because I actually took notes about how angry this made me. The George Floyd stuff was like in the middle of these dumb jokes, and you have all these like big celebrities that they can't really figure out how they were using the celebrities in the first place. Like, they're like, oh, here's Samuel L. Jackson playing character Samuel L. Jackson, but here's Lisa Kudrow playing woman from White House.
And she was supposed to be like a Trump staffer, and like, this is already aged so poorly. We're 3 months into 2021, and it's like completely unrelatable. Like,
and then in the middle of these like dumb bits and dumb jokes, they're like, George Floyd died on, and it's just like, dude, you can't
so
like
bad.
Yeah, like you said, it's like I got fucking whiplash from it. It's like, yeah, man, a lot of the, like, I know you're doing like a weird snarky sort of, whatever the fuck, but like, yeah, like you said, like, last year was fucking hell for a lot of people, and there was a lot of serious shit people had to reconcile with, and to put like the death of a person that caused a worldwide outrage, and like a level of advocacy that people still aren't taking seriously, to just shove that in the middle of like your fucking dumb Twitter jokes was like insulting to him, insulting to me as a viewer, insulting to everybody involved in it.
God, like, honestly, I was kind of like, I got to remind myself like what happened, because I watched this when it came out, which was again in December, and again I apologize for the delay, but like, as I began talking about it, like my eyes just like glossed over and I entered the Avatar state and I just remembered this horrible fucking piece of shit and like every fucking detail. So yeah, you mentioned the cast here. We got a star-studded cast, folks. You're going to want to watch it. It's Samuel L. Jackson, Hugh Grant, Lisa Kudrow, Leslie Jones, Kumail Nanjiani, Tracy Ullman, Lawrence Fishburne, just to name a good handful. But like, I mean, the jokes. And again, like, we were like, oh, well, it's death to 2020, where everybody thinks 2020 is a big garbage fire. Like, that's the whole thing. But it's like, right. It's like, it just comes across from this, like, just this very antiquated sense of humor as well, where I have
written in my notes, working title was Fuck 2016. Because it's the same level of gravitas. Because the whole funny thing about Fuck 2016 is it's just like, things aren't really that bad, but like there's things that are happening that are bad, but it's not like, it's not bad yet, but like we all sort of hate this year. It's a collective dumpster fire. They took that energy and put that forward to describe a year that was actually that bad. You know, it's fuck 2020. And it's like, hey, man, a lot of people died.
And again, like, not even over. It released at the peak of the fucking virus, at its absolute worst.
Right.
And again, there was like a horrible fucking, politics race. The Capitol was raided a week after this movie came out.
Yeah.
Just awful. Like, and they were trying to do this like, oh, both sides, like thing. And just, God, like ripping. It was like, yeah, but everybody knows Joe Biden's a creep. And it's like, yeah, we don't like him either, man. Like, that's not like, it's not, you're not kicking both sides. Like, there's a lot of people who didn't like either one of them. And like, it's not like acting like, oh, this is just how it is. Just, I mean, like, I am so angry even thinking about this again. I am just livid. It was disgusting. There was a scientist. There was a character who was a scientist who was trying to figure out how to cure COVID-19, which, very funny. Yeah, the virus that's still continuing to wipe out the global population. Where he was learning to floss and do the floss stance. And like I had to stop myself from pulling out a large brown clump of hair from my head.
Do you remember the scientist? Because, of course, I think they were playing the scientist off to be like he was like, and maybe the actor was, I don't know, but he had a very thick, like, Central African dialect, like he was Nigerian or something like that. I think
he is. I'm looking it up.
He is.
Right now,
well,
yeah.
They definitely played into that. Because if you remember, do you remember the scientist's explanation for how coronavirus came to be?
Because I don't remember.
I have the quote right here, and I kind of want to do the voice, but I won't. Maybe I'll slip into it a little bit. But he says, he said, the coronavirus came from a man getting bat juice in his pee-pee hole.
Is that funny to anyone? I mean, that's not even funny to people who believe in that. That's not funny to people who don't believe in that. And that's not funny to people who are like that childish either, who find that kind of like humor to be funny.
He got bat juice. Bat juice. Bat juice. Bat juice.
And you know what? It's funny because if more people watch this fucking piece of shit, or at least like stuck around long enough to get to that part of the movie, there probably would have been a controversy, like, we need to talk about Death to 2020 and how it promotes like anti-Asian stereotypes where they eat bats. But it's like nobody even cared. It was like, it was so unceremonious. It couldn't even get canceled.
Because there were some cancelable moments too. I have two things written down here. Joe Keery, right? Joe Keery was he's the guy with the hair in what's it called?
Stranger Things. Yeah.
Yeah, Stranger Things. Native Chicagoan, by the way. Went to DePaul.
Okay.
Two things he did that were really funny that I had to take note of. One, he was talking about he was doing DJ sets for people. That was his way of coping with the virus.
Yeah, I remember now.
Yeah, his DJ name was DJ Gender Neutral Parties.
That's funny, man.
That
That's
was
really
his
good.
DJ name, was DJ Gender Neutral Parties.
Topical, I guess.
Like,
also,
it's-
like the
It's not even
OnlyFans thing.
good.
Remember he was like, he's been like, I think that was the one thing that was like kind of close to being clever was like him. Like, didn't he have some bit about how he like blew all his money on like OnlyFans or something?
Yeah. And then if you remember the part directly after that, there was a joke where he jokingly drove around a black neighborhood to show how brave he was. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and it's like it would be funny if they weren't trying to be. It would be funny if they weren't coming across as like we have to play it safe. There's probably like honestly, there's probably like a whiteboard in the writers' room for this where like they had like it was marked in two halves, left and right, and they had to have like 50% jokes on both of them just because like we want it to be as palatable as possible to the lowest common denominator of human being, and that's I mean. I watched this because I don't never mind. I don't want to shit talk someone just in case I will. Okay, I'll say it. Somebody said that it was funny, and they said that it was like, oh, actually, it's more like a documentary, even though it's a fake one. And just like, I'll bite. I was bored.
Had this person not seen The Office?
Well, I think they were like trying to say like, oh yeah, like it's just like the kind of person who thinks it's funny to call 2020 a dumpster fire.
That is funny.
I mean, debatable. But alas, I digress. I watched the movie, and it was very, very hard to get through. Like, Leslie Jones' character in this movie, I mean, I'm just going through the list of, like, just all these memories. Like, it's flashing back to me. Like, her whole thing is just like, yeah, I just hate people. And it's like, I mean, that's not... it's so tone deaf and not funny. It's just like, moreover, it's so not funny.
Right.
Painfully so.
One of my notes in here that I specifically wrote down at some point while watching it, I wrote, there's a way to make tragedy funny, and this isn't it. No,
it's not. And it was like they played it both like too safe and like went too far. It was just this weird, uncomfortable...
Like the whole, I'm going to drive around a black neighborhood and like to show how safe it is. It's like, because there's people that do YouTube videos like that. That is a thing.
And it's bad. Yeah. I mean, that's like bad. It's like,
and you could parody it so much better. Like if you were to parody that, you could turn the guy into an actual like Nazi, and like, and that's the joke is that he's like a, who's the one guy that's a Nazi that ran against AOC the one time? Joey Salads. You could turn him into like a Joey Salads parody, and it'd be like poignant, and it'd be like, these are the types of people that do this type of stuff. They're pieces of shit. But instead, he's DJ Gender Neutral Party. Give me a fucking break.
And like, not to mention, like within the same practical breath, they did a tribute to George Floyd.
Yeah.
Like just. And I'm also remembering remember the Karen in the movie, the house mom who got like red pilled into being a Nazi.
Yeah, it was funny. It was
because of like Facebook groups. Like, what the fuck? I thought it was 4chan. Were they just like thinking like, oh, like our audience is like so milquetoast they wouldn't even know what 4chan is because they're too scared to use the internet outside of Facebook and Netflix on their fucking internet browser.
Well, and that's why I think it's like insulting. That's another degree of insultingness. It's insulting to your intellect, because if they would be a little more precise with the jokes, I think maybe less people would get them, but the people that got them would appreciate that they put in a little bit of effort.
Like, but that's not why this exists. Like, clearly it's made just to like pander. Yeah,
right. It's literally just like, and I mean, added to the fact that there are several SNL cast members in this, it's like if SNL did a documentary. It's that level of just dumb.
I mean, that's true. It's very much on the same level of just completely out of touch and completely unfunny.
I have written down, I made note of the time when Hugh Grant's character, who was like this weird, like, sort of posh English librarian, was
Yep.
confused about whether or not Westeros was real.
That's not funny. That show is like not relevant either.
Right.
Also, it wasn't even on TV in 2020, which is the year that's in the title of the movie.
Nobody's talking about Westeros in the year 2020. Like, it's not.
Remember that fucking girl, like the British girl who's like, oh, I'm watching a documentary. It's called America.
No, if I didn't have notes on this, I would have wiped it.
Do you not remember, or do you just not want to remember?
I don't remember.
There was like the character, she was like watching the news, and she was like, it was this like long running gag throughout the whole movie. They would cut to her, and she thought America was the name of a documentary, or no, I'm sorry, it was the name of a reality show, because it's so crazy here.
The jokes are so like,
it's so fucking embarrassing.
It's just one of those things where I do look at some of the things people, you know when I don't know, I feel like this is a point of view that I have towards so many things nowadays, is that people don't rise to a certain level because of their experience and their expertise or anything like that. Like, sure, some people do, if you go to however many years of medical school, blah, blah, blah. But like, you can become a doctor, you can become really good at being a doctor, et cetera, et cetera. I can't just become a doctor, but like, you do realize like how many people are in certain levels of like, oh, you're a writer for a TV show, you're a owner of a company, you're this, you're that, you're a politician. And it's just like, at a certain point, when do you realize that just like literally everybody's an idiot and nobody knows what they're doing, and you have just as good a shot at becoming a writer for one of these fucking TV shows as anybody else does? Because very clearly, the people that worked on this did not give a fuck about putting any work, any time, any effort into actually creating something. Monkey could have written this.
Honestly, I mean, yeah, and that very well could have been the case. If that were the case, I would be slightly impressed, but only slightly, because it is that fucking bad.
Yeah.
And I want to call out in the movie, one of the most jarring points in the movie is something that neither of us have even talked about yet. There is a 5 to 10 minute commercial for Netflix in the movie. Do you remember this? When the Queen of England is like talking about how she's like, oh, I'm on Netflix and I can't get past the front page. All I do is browse, and it's like, oh, so relatable. It's like this, like, and then like she literally goes through like the front page of Netflix and starts like going down a list and talking about the different like Netflix original shows. And it's not just like a one-off thing. Like, she goes into like great detail about like several of them, where it's like, this is a commercial, like in a movie.
Okay, so I have written down, these are the 3 words I have written down. I wrote Queen Elizabeth thing. And honestly, that's the most I remember, because I've tried so hard to block this from my memory that I have to go off notes, because I don't remember that happening, because the whole thing was so bad. It's like a dumpster fire in the fact that if you try and see what's inside the dumpster while it's on fire, you can pick maybe a couple things out, but you can't pick everything out because it's on fire. That's how it feels.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean, I'm also thinking about one of the worst jokes in the whole movie as well was they were like Samuel Jackson's character had some joke where he's trying to equate Greta Thunberg to Billie Eilish because they're both like depressing teenagers, or they're teenagers who say depressing things. I'm convinced that Billie Eilish is a fucking psyop, like doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And like Greta Thunberg is like, it's depressing that like we're talking about global warming. I mean, like, I guess it's depressing, but like that's kind of like a really weird way to write it off. Like, the take of the joke is like, it's like it feels very much like the Tina Fey, like, just eat sheet cake, kind of thing.
Well, I also have it written in my notes that this is basically like the movie version of the Imagine song.
Yeah, that's actually a very apt comparison.
Just throw some celebrities in, have them. They don't even have to sing in tune. Just put a celebrity face on. They can deliver their lines.
Yeah, fuck
we'll
it.
all
Who
feel
cares?
better. Yeah, fuck it. Who cares? You're sad. I'm sad too in my mansion. It's the same shit.
I don't have a whole lot else to say about this. I know I'm kind of like just entering this sort of like fugue state that brought on by just thinking about this.
It deserves it. So yeah. No,
so I mean, I think this might. I'll have to go over the list of other stuff we've talked about on Fire Bros, but I'm
right.
I may be jumping the gun, but I think this is probably the worst thing we've talked about on here.
I most likely agree with that.
And it can't all be good stuff. They can't all be just like, oh, I really like this thing. I really
right.
We have to like there is a fucking there's a bonfire. There's a blistering tower of flames in the library for a reason. And that's exactly where this is going to go. I'm actually going to wipe my ass with it first and puke on it. And what do they say? Put bad juice out of my pee-pee hole on it or whatever the fuck.
Yeah.
That, and then just watch it. Just every ash just like is like fluttering in the air above me.
Yeah. I'd like to give it the Hitler treatment. Maybe put a cyanide capsule inside of the book.
Okay.
Shoot it while cracking the cyanide capsule open and then throwing it into the fire. That's what I feel like it deserves.
I like that. And I would 100% agree. This is awful. I think, okay, if you've been at all intrigued by this and you haven't seen it before, get some friends together. If you guys are all, in the same, this is a little treat for you. Get vaccinated, get some friends together and just get blackout drunk and watch this and have a laugh at how bad it is. It's one of those,
Yeah.
But at the same time, actually, I would caution you to say maybe wait 10 years so it's not as like current because it's definitely too soon. And I can't believe I'm using that like unironically, but it's
right.
it's too soon for this. This is just for the tone they're going for, the vision of this. It's just all kinds of tone deaf.
Yep. And it tries to play it off like it's self-aware tone deafness, but it definitely is not. In fact, it's more insulting that they think that they're trying to be self-aware at all.
Let's move on to the last session of the book, or whatever the hell we're calling it now.
The last chapter, perhaps.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. We'll figure it out as we're going.
That's at least thematically appropriate. So
that makes sense.
The last item on the docket, whatever, is Tickled. Tickled is a 2016 New Zealand documentary about competitive endurance tickling. That's how this was pitched to us. This was from the people in the Discord. A good number of people in the Discord were like, you guys have to watch this,
Right.
And I'd heard of this before. I didn't know anything about it.
Same.
And then they were like, everybody was like, don't look anything up about this. Don't. And that's what I'm going to say now is if you haven't seen this, honestly, I would say, I kind of want to save this for last because of this.
Yeah.
Pause this and watch it. I think, what was it on Amazon Prime or Netflix? Or no, it was on Hulu. It was on Hulu.
Right, yeah, it was on Hulu, yeah.
So if you have a Hulu subscription, it's on there. And yeah, I think that this is, they were right. Watch this with an open mind and, clear eyes and without any preconceptions because that again, was how they pitched it to us. It's about a documentary about competitive tickling, which sounds crazy and weird and whatever, but it definitely gets very weird and disturbing, like no joke.
Yeah, I mean, the direction that it went in, like you said, people have told me to watch this before, and I was sort of like, yeah, whatever. And they're like, no, it starts off and you think that it's one thing and then it goes deeper and then it goes deeper, which I feel like there's a lot of documentaries that are like that where they're like, it goes deep. And it's like, yeah, that's called doing a documentary. But it did go in a weird direction, like way beyond anything I would have comprehended. Like, I don't know. It made sense the direction that it went in, but also like, I didn't think it'd go there to that degree. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, the basic, I guess, and, if you're listening now, I'm just going to go ahead and say the spoiler chains are off. We're just going to talk about it.
Yeah.
This guy's David Faria, I forget how to pronounce his name, but he's this New Zealand television reporter. He's focusing on quirky and odd stories. He ends up getting this story comes across his desk about competitive endurance tickling, which is this these guys, like, they tie each other down to, like, you know, tables and stuff, and like they tickle, and they have to like endure the tickling, which if you've been tickled, you know, pretty hard, you know how that can be it could be, you know, like, let go of me, huh? You know, you're laughing your ass off and whatever. It's been
right.
Grant, when's the last time you've been seriously tickled?
I couldn't tell you. But I'm sure that all of the listeners have been tickled before. I'm sure.
Honestly, I can't remember the last time I was seriously tickled. Not to say that I miss it, especially after watching this, but like,
yeah,
I remember like there was like, I feel like it's easier to get tickled when you're a kid.
Yeah,
like,
of course, yeah.
Where it's just you're like much more, I don't know, your skin's more sensitive, and like it turns into like, get off me, man! You start fucking like punching someone because they're tickling you too hard.
Well, and like kids are little and they're cute and they're fun and they're funny, and like an adult is just like, what's going on here with this? What are you? Why are you touching me? You know, sort of shit. You know. That being said, it was, they sort of explain it a little bit more in like as the documentary goes on. They explain this concept a little bit more, but the weird thing about these videos that they were making is that they weren't explicitly sexual, but there was a weird underlying deviant sexuality that was sort of being portrayed, but it never got to the point where it's like they're having these tickle fights or whatever the fuck, and that they're like undressing each other, or that oops, one guy gets a boner or something like that. Like that never, as far as I saw, that never happened in the videos that the guy was producing. And then they got into a little bit more like, yeah, tickle fetishes are a thing in porn and stuff like that, and they showed like an example of like, you know, this one guy who's a porn actor that does do actual tickle fetishes, and like the drastic difference between, you know, the consensual pornographic actor, you know, doing that versus like these weird sort of down on their luck guys that were like signing up for this weird shady thing that they saw in a newspaper that they started getting like harassed and threatened over. It was like night and day, you know. It was like jarring. Yes.
So, God, there was this company called Jane O'Brien Media, where this guy, I mean, I think there's a lot of psychoanalysis that is necessary for this whole story.
Yeah.
So the television reporter is, I think he's in a gay marriage, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. He said he was like bisexual or something, and the guy said, "Oh, I'm not talking to some homosexual journalist or something like that." And he's just like, whatever, man.
So
I don't know.
And then just because he was like briefly like it just like the way that these people, this media company, like who was funding this competitive tickling, was able to find, like, the second this guy in New Zealand started talking about it, they were like on him with like legal threats and all this stuff,
right?
Like, and there was like serious money behind it, where it's like, what the fuck is this?
Right.
And man, yeah, it gets so weird. I mean, there's a lot of like story beats. I mean, we could go over like, you know, he invites the financiers and the lawyers to come with and talk about it some more. And then he ends up like, you know, a lot of these people have like NDA agreements, not really even that, but like they're just like threats, like you can't talk about this, whatever.
Right.
Or like, you know, like that one guy who he was like a high school football coach. He needed money or something. He like did it. And like they like told everybody he was gay and that he was a child molester and all this other stuff. Like they doxed him, like they got him fired and all this other stuff. Just awful stuff. And a lot of this was like, you know, it was grooming too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
It was like grooming, like under, like a lot of, they would like kind of get these people when they're underage, and when they were like, oh yeah, they're 18, whatever. Even then it was like questionable. Like, oh, well, you know, not even then all the time. I feel like it just because, oh, well, tickling's not illegal, but there was like this extra, you know, sense of caution where.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and that's the thing. That's like the weird moral quandary that I think like it's at least part of it. is the fact that, again, like, none of it was explicitly sexual. Like, they weren't tickling and then fucking. It was just like a weird tickle video, and the subtext is like people are probably jerking off to this stuff, but it, like, the way that they did it was almost worse.
Yeah. So moving along though to the guy who was in charge of this, or rather the person, they were known as Terry DeSisto, aka Terry Tickle. There were so many layers to this. Like, the true mastermind behind it was like, oh, it was a facade behind a facade behind a facade. And it was just like this guy's alter alias, basically. This Terry Tickle, Terry DeSisto. She was like allegedly this like woman who was really into like men who were tickling each other, kind of thing. Whether that was like sexual or just sort of like a perversion of power. And there was even like that weird town in Michigan where they had like the high school. It was like this whole like community was like manipulated by this person. You remember that? Where like they were like, you, if you wanted to get ahead in like sports, you had to be a part of this like tickling scene.
I don't really remember that. But that could have just been part of it that I fucking blocked out or something.
Super fucked up. But I mean, again, we end up finding out that Terry DeSisto is this actually a man. David D'Amato, I believe his name is. And yeah, what was he like I'm looking here. He was a former assistant principal.
Yeah.
And he was basically, he was like the son of like a very rich family. Well, apparently he died in 2017. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I forget if the movie said that or not, but I think that
I think
they said
did like right at the end.
Yeah, so he was like he went through like law school, and there was this whole thing of like he was very the guy's a sociopath, like of the largest variety.
Yeah, and I think that's like what was fueling it. Like, and did they sort of talk about his did they talk about his upbringing at all? Because there was definitely like some weird closeted tendencies that like it seemed like he himself didn't really even want to face, which is why he wasn't making like porn. He was making like this weird tickle fetish shit that like was obviously supposed to be porn, but like there seemed to be an aspect to it that like he himself didn't want to confront the fact that he was doing that and making it, and like it got into a lot of just the fact that it was like this big like power trip, and he got off on just like manipulating people over it. But there was like an obvious definite sexual aspect to it all, you know.
He like maybe he was like they said he was like bullied when he was a kid. He's like maybe like effeminate or something, or they mentioned that he like never had a girlfriend and stuff like that. And I mean, it seemed to be like, I think that they said that they thought he was like asexual or something. But regardless, a guy who was like closeted something, but he, ends up like what really became very fucking tense in this movie was where the reporter we follow from New Zealand ends up tracking this guy down.
Oh yeah.
And like they have a face-to-face meetup, and it's like it's scary because there's so much buildup, and the guy is like, he's like, his like hands are shaking before he's like, they set up this whole thing to like, they found out where his car was. It's a crazy story. And then he ends up, like I said, like find him and his partner, like they're tailing the guy, but not too close. And they end up like finding him at like, he confronts him and he's like, I don't know. He like denies, but he's like, you better watch your fucking self, Oh, and it's like, no, this is the guy who's like ruined so many lives.
Right. Mask off.
And
time.
It's like, and it's just this like pudgy middle-aged white guy,
Right. It always is,
Yeah.
Pudgy middle-aged white guys are the fucking bane of society.
Yeah, and people in the chat are saying he's a real-life supervillain. I mean, truly. I feel like there's like an aspect of it where it's like, could this have been avoided if like maybe culture at the time was more accepting of whatever he was not? But I also think it's not even just that. I think that he had, God knows like what kind of personality disorders or whatever kind of stuff that was just like, it doesn't matter, like whatever like identity or whatever shit he wasn't facing. It was like this guy was like very troubled and like very fucking manipulative.
Right. And I think that the answer
Dangerous,
to that,
yeah.
I think the answer to that is both yes and no. Yes, in the sense that, again, like they showed like actual tickle fetish porn, and when you're watching those scenes, you're like, okay, that's like just porn, right? That's shot and looks like and feels like what a porn would be. This does not feel like that. So it might be different if he's like sort of struggling with some of these closeted tendencies or something like that, but also at the same time, like, how many of these people exist in maybe things that aren't as weird as like tickle fetish videos? How many of these people like use these weird sociopathic coercive tendencies in like normal life and like your job and like, you know, pyramid scheme shit and stuff like that? It's just like, how many more of these people are out there, but they're just not making videos about tickling, you know?
I mean, I think there's a lot, but I think that it's just a perfect storm where it's like I truly believe that there are not many people of this caliber of that kind of like behavior.
Absolutely.
Like I think this is a very rare breed of human where it's disturbing, and it's like, again, it's, you know, someone on the level of like a John Wayne Gacy type person.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like there was, again, like this was a gripping documentary, and I was like tense, like it was scary, and it was, you know, like more than, I mean, like for me, it's like more than any scary movie is like a true story where we see these true events, and this, you know, we see the waves that were caused by this manipulation and lies and like pain and stuff, and
right.
Just facing that head on, a guy who really wasn't involved in it, and like wasn't just like potentially throwing away his career, but like his life.
Right. Cashew in the chat pointed out there was a version of it, or like at least a video that was released where one of the people interviewed like went back on their word and was praising what's his name, David D'Amato. And I guess I'll watch that later. I'm sort of interested in it. It's crazy to think, I mean, these videos that this guy was making have been like circulating since like the 90s, like early internet shit, you know,
yeah.
It's crazy how long he was capable of getting away with the shit for, you know.
That is crazy, man. Like, and it's also, back then it was like, oh, don't tell anyone your name on the internet, don't talk to, and it's like, this guy's the reason for that, basically.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
And he just like a relic of that age that continued to sort of live on and prosper as the anonymity became easier and easier.
Right.
So yeah, even if you're still listening and you didn't watch it, I recommend it. It's, us talking about it does not do it justice, especially those moments of true fear and seeing and discovering these things for yourself and going along for the ride.
Right. And yeah, just the fact that it's like, it's real and it happened, and like, you know, seeing the cost of it, and seeing like, you know, how some of these people's lives were ruined as a result of a video that went viral on the internet of them tickling somebody, which is like, again, a mostly harmless thing, but with like sort of nefarious underpinnings that sort of like, why are we all uncomfortable with it? And I do think that there was a level of, they sort of, I think, touched upon it a little, the concept of like, and maybe this is something that people deal with less and less as like culture's becoming more and more understanding of, you know, gender and like gender norms and sexuality and stuff like that. But how, like, you know, if you're a straight male, like it is like somehow inherently effeminate to be tickled, and that like the underlying message of all of this is that like, oh, all of these people are afraid that they're going to be outed as gay, and it's just like, like back then it's like, but now it's like, but what's wrong with that? But back then it's like, oh, there's like a whole thing like, why does it make us uncomfortable to watch this? Like, what's wrong with this? And again, like,
it wasn't even just gay. Like, they're like, it was getting spun into like, this is a pedophile, this guy's
right,
whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, truly things that are like bad.
Right. Whereas like, yeah, to think that ruined that guy's life when it is just like, okay, like, I get that it looks bad and there could be some weird shit to it too, but like at the end of the day, it's just a video of two grown men tickling each other. Like, I don't. There's such a weird aspect to the uncomfortability of the entire documentary, and I feel like that's in and of itself makes it worth watching, because the content matter and like the evolution of the story and all of that is very uncomfortable, and it's one of those things that you just sort of have to see in order to sort of like truly take it all in, you know?
Agreed. I mean, unless do you have anything else you want to say about this?
Not really. This wasn't my favorite thing, but I would say it belongs on the shelf. I think it was, especially in terms of like early internet history and like the evolution of it. As a result, I think it was a very interesting thing, you know, for two people that do a podcast about internet culture. It was like, this was kicking around back then, you know?
Yeah, it's a great suggestion also.
Yeah.
I would put it, I would put it on a, not the highest shelf of the library, but a middle to high shelf.
Yeah, I'd say middle to low.
Because I feel like there were moments where it felt like it could have been a little more. I mean, granted, it is what it is, but like,
right.
And those are very few and far between. Ultimately, I thought it was a great movie, great documentary. I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. Probably, I mean, out of the four things we talked about this episode, it was my favorite thing.
Right. I would say I would rank it in order from.
And yeah, Sleep Science in the chat said, yeah, you're welcome. I think him and Nico were telling us to watch it. I think maybe somebody else too, if I recall.
Yeah,
Dilbert?
I would say,
was it Dilbert?
I don't know. Did Dilbert say he watched it?
Not sure. Remember. Well, regardless.
But I would say my order would probably be Last Dance, and then Tickled and Bug Fables are tied. I know it's weird to say that sentence out loud, but I said it out loud anyway. And then definitely the Death to 2020 was Death to that movie.
Oh, man. I honestly forgot. Like, I was just so engrossed in talking about this that I almost forgot about how fucking bad that was.
Right.
God.
For a split second. Yeah.
And again, it's like you can't even fucking enjoy it on a level that's like meant to like hate it at the time, because it's too soon. I would say at the very least, wait till you get a fucking vaccination until you watch this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait until you and your loved ones are vaccinated.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that just about does it. Thanks to everybody who's listening. Really appreciate the donations. Goes a long way for us and makes us feel real good too. I truly do appreciate it. And I am very apologetic for the delay here. It's been crazy. I started a new job in the last few months as well. So I've been like really adjusting to like a new schedule and new responsibilities, as well as like, you know, hey, you want to do this show? Hey, you want to do this stream? Hey, you want to do this show? Right. And it's like, we want to get the show and, all this stuff out there. And it's like, hard to say no to all this stuff. So, we're in all the, trying to stay active in these times. And now for me personally, I'm a lot more settled in. So I'm definitely ready to hit these with more regularity.
Right, for sure. Yeah, so drop any suggestions if anybody has any, and we'll get to what seems like it'll appeal to us, because I always hate the concept of like, just taking some suggestion up just because somebody said it. But if it's something that, here's the thing, pitch it to us.
Yeah.
Give us a
elevator
pitch. Give us a solid pitch.
What's the log line? Let's go.
Right, no begging, but just go, hey, you like the internet? Do you like watching grown men tickle each other? You should check this out. And I'll be like, huh.
You know what I want to see now? I want to see a crossover documentary between Last Dance and Tickled.
The last tickle.
Yeah, like just a love child of the two.
Right.
Scott or fucking what's his name? Dennis Rodman has got some crazy tickling thing in North Korea. Who knows? Let's make it happen though.
Yeah, I don't think crossover documentaries are a thing, but you're
they should be.
Make it a thing.
They should be.
Sure.
Anyway, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next time. And like we said, drop those suggestions in the Fire Bros chat thread, chat room, channel. Drop them in the Fire Bros channel of the Discord.
Oh yeah, and then I guess just to sort of like solidify, the appreciation. I think by now the new picture is up on the feed. So,
that's right.
Thanks again to June Bat for the image. It's very good.
Was it John Elizabeth?
Stintsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's
Appreciate it. Yeah.
That made my week.
Definitely. Yeah. We've been wanting a new like cover photo because it's just been the classified slapped on our faces, for however long. So it's good to have its own image finally. So
yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you guys soon.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.